Hello, and welcome to our Indigenous Sport Inclusion session as part of the Kids Sport Speaker Series. We're very excited to welcome you into the space today and to be able to share this session with you and the incredible presenters that we have lined up for today. The Kids Sport discussion series, this is the fourth in our session, and we're really pleased that it's been supported by the Calgary Flames Foundation. And we launched this series because Kids Sport believes in education and the responsibility to ensure that our clubs, the clubs our kids play in, have an understanding of the diverse backgrounds of the participants that need and that we're serving throughout our communities. Through this series, we're hoping to open discussion and to create dialogue and appreciation of some of those diverse backgrounds and to really set the stage for better inclusion and ultimately belonging in our sport and physical activity spaces. We do really recognize and acknowledge the Calgary Flames Foundation for bringing this to life with us and look forward to supporting your journey as we go forward. I want to acknowledge the territories that I'm calling in from today, and those are of the Coast Salish people and home of the Esquimalt, Songhees, and Wasanich nations. And I've been very grateful to be an uninvited settler here over the last 25 years and grew up as an uninvited settler on Ktunaxa territories in the East Kootenays. And I believe it's my responsibility to continue to learn about the histories and the origin stories of these peoples and to learn and ask for guidance about how I can be part of reconciliation as we go forward. And given that we're in Indigenous History Month and heading towards National Indigenous Peoples Day, lots of opportunities this month and always for us to dig into this space and to learn and to journey together. So many of the Indigenous leaders that I work with continue to give us guidance and support and advice on how to move reconciliation forward. And so our job is also to listen, to learn, to appreciate the cultures and those journeys together, because we do all need to be in this together. And we'll talk a little bit today about the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action for sport and physical activity, and dig in with our amazing panelists on how to move that work forward. So just really briefly, my name is Andrea Carey. I'm the Chief Inclusion Officer with Inclusion Incorporated, and we're a partner with Kids Sport on this series. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and elle, and I identify as a cisgender female and identify as non-disabled, neurotypical, and a brain tumor survivor. And I come from Irish and Welsh background. And I've been the moderator for these sessions and look forward to supporting some incredible conversations today as well. So I'd love to welcome both of our guests into the space. First, I want to introduce Beth Hudson. Beth is also known as Sagawi Puhi Iskewo. And Beth, I hope I did that justice because it's such a beautiful name, and is traditionally from Sucker Creek First Nation on Treaty 8 territory, but now lives in Lidley Q First Nation in the Northwest Territories on the land known as the Denendeh. Beth works as an on-the-land consultant in the Northwest Territories, but started her journey many years ago as being a kids sport programming ambassador in Alberta, and I've had the great pleasure of working with Beth on a number of projects over the years, and just always really value and appreciate the perspectives that she brings to the table. Our other guest today is Jake Hendy, and Jake and I actually got to meet Jake on one of his very first days in his role with the Indigenous Sport Council of Alberta, and has done a brilliant job of weaving together a number of areas, including the Indigenous in games in Alberta over the years, which he's the CEO of as well. He's also a board member for Basketball Alberta and the In Motion Network for Women and Girls. And we're actually going to lead off today's session by having Jake share with us a little bit of a presentation and to take us through some more context in this journey and to help support where we go to in the panel. So Jake, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, and just so grateful to have you here today and to be able to work in this space with you.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. I'm honored to be able to come here and speak. And thank you, Calgary Flames Foundation. Love to work with you guys, with the Indigenous Sport Council of Alberta. Just throwing that out there. But yeah, I'm the CEO for the Alberta Indigenous Games, which is a separate organization. Started out with them in 2016 as CEO, and our games have grown. We're the largest multi-sport Indigenous summer games on a yearly basis in North America. We'll be just about as big as the NAG Games, North American Indigenous Games. Next year, we probably should be close to that. But we're a yearly event. It's in Edmonton in August. Tremendous opportunity. We have 15 sports, youth ages 10 up to 21. Scouts, colleges, universities coming out to recruit the older kids. We have scholarships. We have amazing provincial sport bodies that support our games. Basketball Alberta, they coordinate our basketball, rugby Alberta, soccer Alberta, athletics Alberta. It's incredible. And if any of you that are out there watching this want to be part of reconciliation and do your part with whatever you can, because I know a lot of people, they get their orange shirt on Orange Shirt Day, National TRC Day, and they're like, okay, now what can I do? Reach out to us. I have a big games event. 2019, because of the support or the growth with the games that we grew, we had just under 500 youth out of the previous games when our founder passed away. And then this year we'll have close to 3,500 youth. And so from my work there, I saw that ISCA executive director position opened up, and I applied, and it worked out great. They liked me and got hired. I was born in Southern California, grew up in Utah, in a border town with the Ute Reservation. My dad worked there. He currently works in the Navajo Nation. He's a suicide prevention and administrator down there in Utah and Monument Valley area. My wife, she's Shake Crowfoot. She's a third great granddaughter of Chief Crowfoot. My father-in-law, Strader Crowfoot, was chief for 5 terms in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s in Siksika Nation. And I'm super happy to be here. I just want to share a brief little, the land acknowledgement where I'm coming from, just outside of Calgary. And, Chief Crowfoot, I'd like to give a little bit of perspective to these land acknowledgements. The Blackfoot, we're a proud nation. The whiskey traders came in and broke that up completely. They used to own lots of horses and very strong and healthy. And then they started fighting, and there was murders, and the RCMP came out to protect, and Crowfoot made friends with them. And, and then there were other communities, and then we were signing Treaty 7, with the Tsuut'ina Nation, and trying to get everybody the blood and everything, wanted to work together, but the government had other plans to try to separate. And an interesting part about Tsuut'ina, if you guys ever come to Calgary, it's just outside. Originally, I've been reading a lot of Blackfoot history books that you can read that are out there. They're really good. And originally, Tsuut'ina was going to be in Siksika as well and share the land right next to them. But Chief Bullhead didn't want to go out there. He wanted to stay in their land that they've been to a lot, which is where they're at currently. And but he was going to make them go there. And then he went there, and they told him, we will have all this land prepared for you. We'll have everything. And then he went out there, and it wasn't prepared, and the land wasn't ready. And so then the government's like, all right, we'll just let them have the land. So they were able to stay there. And he's such a great example of sticking to where he wanted. And then in Siksika in 1910, they broke the treaty and took about half of their land. And the Prime Minister actually was just out here last week acknowledging that that had happened from the government. So that was a good step. But in the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, we honor, acknowledge Makoksinitsis, which is a Blackfoot word used to describe the landscape, which is now known as Calgary. It's a literal meaning of that word is elbow, and references to the area between the Elbow River and where it meets the Bow River. It's a gathering place for the Netsapi, or the Blackfoot people, since time immemorial. And so we recognize them in the traditional Treaty 7 territory and oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, as well as the Ayaks, Nakota, and Tsuut'ina nations. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. Finally, we acknowledge all nations, Indigenous and non, who live, work, and play on this land and who honor and celebrate this territory. The sacred gathering place provides us with opportunity to engage in and demonstrate leadership and reconciliation. Thanks for your enthusiasm and to be part of this. So that's where I'm at today. I'm based out of Edmonton, but I'm down here. We had a health fair I was at. Okay, let's get started with our Indigenous Sport Council of Alberta. I'm the executive director. We have a lot of exciting things. Taylor is one of our amazing team members, and she's going to be moving the screen and presenting that while I talk. So Taylor, if you want to go ahead. All right. Who are we? So the Indigenous Sport Council of Alberta, we're the provincial sporting body. We're a nonprofit organization. We create physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health and wellness opportunities for Indigenous people of Alberta through sport, physical activity, recreation, and culture. There's 82 provincial sport bodies in Alberta: Hockey Alberta, Soccer Alberta, Basketball Alberta. We're the one for Indigenous people. And we really focus on creating opportunities for people of all ages, for participation-based, but also, all the way up to elite level and supporting athletes to achieve their highest. From children all the way up to, we have programming where 82-year-old has been part of it so far. That's our oldest. This pandemic has, really broken down a lot of things, that mental health, emotional, spiritual, and the medicine wheel teachings, the holistic model, are so important, but that everyone needs that physical part. I was in a pipe ceremony once with Elder Francis Whiskey Jack, and he shared that if you're not balanced in your, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, in all areas, or if you do too much of one or the other, then it throws off your overall well-being. And so we really work hard, because there's a lot of programs and services out there for mental health, emotional, and spiritual for Indigenous adults of all ages, but there's not too much for Indigenous adults for physical, to meet that physical need specifically for them. So with ISA, we really work hard to support the youth, because the youth have unlimited physical opportunities with recess and sports, but to break down barriers for that, but also to create that for the adults as well. So, all right, you go next, Taylor. All right. And so, before colonization, sport, physical activity, they weren't viewed the same as it is in westernized sports. There was the medicine game, lacrosse that they had played, that's an Indigenous sport. That's Canada's summer sport. There was a lot of activities that they did that were physical. And we're not just a sport organization, we're sport, physical activity, and recreation. And a lot of these activities were banned for, the culture, which is a big part for Indigenous people. And as part of that. And so we have some really good quotes on here that refer and that talk to that. And so despite all of that, the resilience of Indigenous people, everyone's been able to be strong and to support that. And so I just want to share this one. To decolonize sport, we need to incorporate traditional and cultural ways of Indigenous people within sports and the systems. We've started by working towards decolonizing sport by creating sporting events for Indigenous people specifically, such as North American Indigenous Games, Alberta Indigenous Games. And that's not ISA doing this, but just in general, the Indigenous community as a whole. The Arctic Winter Games and Dene Games. These large-scale events celebrate traditional Indigenous games and Indigenous people who compete in mainstream sports, while also celebrating the culture and traditions of the people. By self-governance, they can reclaim their power, identity through sport. My experience with Alberta Indigenous Games, it's such a neat, special opportunity to gather that many people and friends from all the nations, from the Dene up north to the Cree, to the Blackfoot, to the Stoney, to the Sioux, and everyone competing on all Indigenous teams against all Indigenous athletes. And gathering is culture, gathering is healing. And so, and then with Alberta Indigenous Games, we're going to be doing an adult AIG next year. And so, it's pretty good. And we'll talk about a little bit more with our fitness challenges that we've done. But okay, Taylor, let's go next. All right. And so we have our truth and reconciliation calls to action. There's the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous, nations and on UNDRIP, Indigenous peoples. They came out with it. And so Canada came out with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which is incredible, to do their part to support UNDRIP for the rights and recognizing that of Indigenous people all over the world. But Canada did theirs with the TRC, if you've heard. And September 30th now is recognized as a holiday, National TRC Day. And so these are essential to recognizing that as a large part of reconciling with Indigenous people of Canada, to support that. And governments, organizations, companies, and individuals can look at this, these calls to action, and see what they can do with their part to support that. And so I highly recommend that everybody, if you haven't been familiar with that, to look at that and to support that. Just a couple summary points. The government must ensure long-term Aboriginal athlete plans, implement policies to support well-being and physical activity by limiting barriers, and create initiatives for funding programs at the national and provincial levels. And so it's something that's out there. It's something that some governments do, some governments don't, or haven't got there quite yet, and are learning. And that's what a big part, what we do, is to educate people. I got 5 kids and they're just running all over the place here. Sorry. And so that's what the Truth and Reconciliation calls to actions are. They're very important. And it's very important to, in the partnership with all governments, to jump on board. It's basically, if you want to know how and what and why to support Indigenous people, groups, nations, communities, read that, and you'll see. And it's more than just sport, but it's physical activity, it's recreation. So that is that. And there's 5 of them specifically just for sport, which is important. All right, let's go next. Okay, so an Indigenous sport body, there's provincial, territorial, Aboriginal sport bodies all throughout Canada. They represent their province or territory. There's 13 of them. And the ILTPD comes from the sport bodies come from that, the Indigenous Long-Term Participant Development Pathway. It's a self-determination of Indigenous peoples led to the development of Indigenous-led and run sports systems. And so in Alberta, we're the Indigenous Sport Council of Alberta. And so we work hard to break down barriers and to create opportunities for Indigenous people, like I said, of all ages. And we do that through the holistic model of the medicine wheel. So you can go next, Taylor. We got a lot of great information, so I'm not gonna be able to cover every single word. I'm gonna summarize that and then leave up for the panel. We did a historic survey that's never been done in the history of Canada. We did a fitness challenge when the pandemic hit. We were gonna do community engagement. It had never been done, to my knowledge. Finding out the needs, barriers, and priorities for sport, physical activity, and recreation for Indigenous people of Alberta. So the 3rd week of March in 2020, we were gonna hit the ground running. We had 25 the spring and summer we were gonna hit, and then COVID hit. So we started the fitness challenges, which you've seen online. They're 10-week summer and winter challenges, 6-week spring, 6-week fall challenges. We give people the workout. It's strength training, 3 days a week, 2 days a week cardio, no weights needed, no transportation, no babysitting, no cost. And it breaks a lot of barriers. So we promoted it, and 75% of our participants are First Nation, 24% Métis, 1% Inuit, 85% are female, 15% are male. If you know any Indigenous people, recommend to do our fitness challenge. They're amazing. People take a picture or a video of themselves every day they work out. They post it to our private Facebook group page, and they earn a ballot that goes towards prize draws that we do every week. It's been incredible. It's engaged people from all over the province, from Denatal north, 10 hours north of Edmonton, down to Piikani, down south, everywhere in between. Urban people are connecting to their culture. Families are getting close together. They have something. And we did it throughout the pandemic. So it broke a lot of isolation. People got really, healthy. We don't focus on losing weight, but just being healthy. And it helped people but some people have lost a tremendous amount of weight. We have nutritionists, a nutritional leader. We have a great thing that all people need is their phone and a Facebook account, and they're able to do it. And so during those challenges, we came up with our survey to get our engagement. And we had a 49 question survey if you live in an urban area, 34 question survey if you live in an Indigenous community. The questions were specifically geared to Indigenous people. And we had over 1,300 people fill out these 15 to 20-minute surveys. Never been done before. Janice Forsyth, she's a nationally renowned Indigenous researcher and author. She's like, Jake, it's never been done. How'd you do this? This is incredible. And I said, well, we just added it to our fitness challenges. And if you fill it out, then you get extra ballots that goes towards prize draws and extra points and stuff. And so that was pretty cool. And so we'll go over, touch on some of these barriers here of the people. So this specific one, I believe this was our urban one. We had 976 responses. So go to the next one, Taylor. Okay, so the biggest thing, the needs that the people said throughout Alberta is physical health. We asked them, what's your need for sport, physical activity, recreation? And they wanted physical health. They could have said sport, they could have said recreation. They wanted better physical health for themselves. Number two, they needed funding to access that. They needed funding. Three, they needed facilities. And for, and this is also people that live in community. And so to be able to have to say that the third highest one is facilities, that's a lot of people don't have that. If you live in a community, you live in a town, you have facilities, you have a lot of that, but a lot of our people don't have that. The top three barriers were cost and access, as well as facilities, stopping them from participating. One of the questions we asked was, why do they participate in sport, physical activity, recreation? 53% said physical. They do it because they want to get that physical part. But then mental was 21%, social was 19%. And we did our fitness challenges. 82% are over the age of 18. We did not expect that. We thought there'd be a lot of youth, but it just shows that adults, everyone is still healing from the intergenerational trauma, the effects of residential schools, 60 systemic racism. And our average age is 39 years old. Our oldest is 82 that have been doing our fitness challenges. And it just shows that when you get your physical strong, it helps you mentally to be able to process throughout the day, emotionally to be a better partner, better parent, grandparent. And then it helps out spiritual, with that connection to the creator as being spiritual beings. So it's pretty good. Okay, next one. All right. And so ISA, what we've done to break those barriers, we have our fitness challenges I talked about. We've partnered with many provincial sport organizations. They have been amazing. So far, everyone we've talked to, they want to provide camps, basketball Alberta, soccer Alberta, ringette Alberta, rugby Alberta, baseball Alberta, lacrosse, in motion, like I could go on and on. And they want to do camps and not just parachute in and come out, but they want to develop sustainability and get that programming and develop athletes, coaches, officials. And that's what we work hard to do. We've come up with a venture race. Nikiska reached out. They're like, how can we be part of reconciliation? And I said, well, first off, it costs way too much to participate. $150 for one person for rentals, lift ticket and lessons. We got it broke down to $25-$30 for Indigenous people to go ski. So we do these ski days throughout the winter. We have all these partnerships. We do the Aboriginal Coaching module, which is a very powerful course. I invite all of you to take it wherever you're stationed at. Reach out with us at ICA. We're in charge of it. We're getting more facilitators. It is so powerful. Everyone, regardless of your race, should take this course for whenever you're working with Indigenous youth or adults or elders, anything, to understand the perspectives. And it goes over the 8 different forms of racism. It's not just one thing that we think and it gets thrown out there, but it really helps you to break down and see the different forms and even within yourself, if you have things that you were learned or taught that you can be aware of. So the Aboriginal Coaching module, my big goal is to get it in every school, every teacher from elementary, high school up to high school and in the universities to take this course. It's so powerful, as well as all the provincial sport bodies. It's incredible. So you can take the course, you reach out to us, and we'll let you know when the next courses are being held and everything. And then the U of A, they're amazing. I can't say enough about University of Alberta. They've reached out, and Tracy Watmore of the kinesiology department, it's like, hey, applied for this grant with you guys. She loved all the work we were doing. So we did a case competition with all our data, because we only have like 4 staff, and we were able to, now 5, we were able to, they did a case competition with 22 teams of 5 students each from the U of A. We took out the non-identifiers, we poured over our data, came up with some amazing solutions. They got funding for that. It was Indigenous-led, the concept, we had mentors, we had the judges. And then actually we've been able to put some of these ideas into action. We've been running pilot projects throughout the province and continue to do more. So we have a great relationship with them. It was another example of U of A being, how can we play a part in reconciliation? So if there's anyone from any other universities or education systems want to reach out. We have so many ideas. We have 20 staff worth of work, I always say, but we only got like 5 staff. And so always looking for more staff, but yeah. All right, let's go next. All right, so how can you help? There's partnerships, donations, partnerships. Again, if you're like, what can I do? We're looking for ski and snowboard programming in Grand Prairie and other places. Basically, a lot of these sports that can typically be a lot, like golf can be a lot. And so we're looking at doing golf days, get people interested, doing specific Indigenous programs and little sessions in the urban area are huge. Talked with one of the Grand Prairie leaderships, I think one of their sports councils. They did a study years back that there's a lot, well over 50% of Indigenous youth in Grand Prairie don't come out and they don't participate in the mainstream sports because they feel, there's a lot of racism that goes on and they're the only Indigenous person there. And so a lot don't come out. So working with partners to put together little camps, little programs in the city with all Indigenous kids that look like themselves so they can come out, get that confidence, get that sport, and then they can go into the mainstream sports. And then we've partnered with Kids Sport Alberta that pays for registration fees. And we'll talk about that later in the panel, some of the questions, but they're an incredible partner that's like, how can we help out? So help them. But yeah, and then we started a scholarship fund. Another example, amazing example is the running room. I showed them our fitness challenges. I was getting my oil change and I showed them the store close by and they're like, this is amazing. You got to talk to our head people. I talked to the head people. They donated gift cards and some shoes and stuff like that for about a year. And then right before TRC Day last year, they're like, hey, we want to help out. What can we do? Because they know that as ISCA, we're the lowest funded Indigenous sport body in all of Canada, despite we're the 3rd highest population. And so then they came out about 3 days before TRC Day, September 30th last year. They said for every pair of shoes sold in our stores nationwide, we're going to donate $10 to ISA to start a scholarship fund. And so we did that, and they did that, and they gave us a check for just over $17,000. And so now we're able to support our elite athletes that reach out and say, hey, I'm going to world championships in Finland. I'm going to, track and field championships in Montreal. In the past, we can't fund that because our funding partners, we don't, from the government, we can't go towards that, just one-off events. But now we have the scholarships, so we're able to support our elite Indigenous sponsored athletes. So that's pretty good. So we have a few scholarship funds and opportunities you could put towards whatever programming, anything that you do that you're like, if you're ever like, man, I wish I could help out somehow with Indigenous communities. I just don't know how, and we get it. Like there's trust issues and there's different things to go through. With ISCA, we're really good, moderator, connection maker, and we have so many partners and resources. We're going to be doing committees throughout the province to have people sit on to tell what they want for their communities for sport, physical activity, recreation. And we just love all the support. But yeah, we've been able to get a lot of support. So it's just been great. All right, next. I think we might be almost done. All right, so the biggest thing is just educate. Next steps, educate yourself. There's cultural safety workshops. Make them available for your staff. They're a great way to understand why reconciliation is important. Like I talked about the ACM already, support Indigenous businesses, organizations, incorporate Indigenous knowledge and cultural awareness into your programming. You can bring some elders out. And if you're interested in being a partner with us and want to increase participation and break down barriers and lower costs for people to come try it out, just let us know. We have a partnership link on our website you can go to because we started getting flooded with so many. So we're like, we need a link. We have an amazing team, by the way, amazing staff. They're all incredible. Anne-Marie, Taylor, Kira, Richard, Christy. And so we have this form you just fill out, share who you are, what you'd like to do, some of your ideas, and then we'll get back to you when we get the time. Instead of having to chase down a bunch of emails and forgetting people, we have this awesome link that you can go to our website. So, all right, next. Okay, I think that's it. And we just have some resources there. But yeah, everything in this spreadsheet, PowerPoint, I believe you guys can get a copy of if you request it. But I think that's it. Thank you for listening.
Amazing, Jake. Thank you for all that incredible information. And Kevin's just posted the link to your website in the chat so people can navigate there. And we will be posting this PowerPoint on our resources page for this discussion series so that folks can go and dive in more detail to all of the incredible detail that's there, because you've provided a really thorough overview. So thank you very much for that.
Welcome.
So I'm going to invite Beth into the space as well. And it looks like we're getting some comments in the chat that people will be reaching out to you, Jake. So be prepared for the slide. We might.
Awesome.
But I love how you just open the door and create the space for folks to connect with you, and that also recognizing that you might not be able to get back right away, but people shouldn't be discouraged by that.
We will. And thank you, Andrea, for doing this. This is incredible. It just helps break down barriers, create opportunities, and create that space for that. So thank you.
Well, it's, as we have learned in this space, it's all about relationships. And so I feel so grateful to be in relationship with both you and Beth, and to be able to share this space with you today. And hopefully this creates an opportunity for some of our audience to build relationships with both of you as well. So welcome to both of you. We're going to go into some panel questions now to kind of navigate through the time we have with our audience, and to share your experience and your knowledge and your wisdom in these spaces. So I want to begin by thinking about, Jake, you did a really great summary talking about some of the research you've done and some of the barriers that Indigenous participants are facing in our sports system. So our first question is around, how can the leaders that are in the space with us today or listening later overcome or break down some of those barriers that Indigenous participants are navigating? And so, Beth, maybe should we kick off with you, since you haven't had an opportunity to speak yet today?
Really quick on this one. Yeah, for anyone that hasn't seen my face before, I'm just really happy and grateful to be here. Explain my story in full right now, but really brief. I'm just so lucky and grateful to also know Jake and a bunch of the other amazing partners that I partnered with IOC recently. That includes kids sport. So my journey was just that I was actually adopted out of the hospital in I was born, so Edmonton, Alberta. I'm traditionally, from Treaty 8 territory, Sutter Creek First Nation. And I did a ton of schooling back in Alberta. So I did 4 degrees or 4 programs with the University of Alberta, the Faculty of Kinesiology. I'm super excited to be going back to wrap up the PhD this year. I focus a lot on land-based learning nowadays. And as was mentioned earlier, I'm living in Denendeh right now, which is in the Northwest Territories. It's wonderful. I'm currently existing out of the but my journey started actually way back when I was in university, and I had the opportunity to work with Kids Sport Alberta actually for the summer months when. And I think back, it was the first time I ever had the opportunity to kind of work within Indigenous areas and spaces in Alberta, and it was so enough so that it showed youth, especially those who feel disconnected, or there's been so much that's gone on in our society. As you can see, so super grateful to just be welcomed back into the space. And to still be here and still doing really similar work in the Northwest Territories, and always just grateful to be able to do work and build community back in Alberta. I miss it there. I miss my homelands, but I'm still happy and grateful to be here. And yeah, I mean, to kind of answer even that's the start of the question, is what more can we do as leaders in Indigenous communities, especially, is really just to increase your own awareness on what's out there, because I think for so often, especially in my adolescence growing up, was that so many of the coaches, the activity leaders, the managers, I played competitive sport growing up in Alberta, enough to get to major league and varsity level. I was in and out of the sports system my whole life, and it was my coaches and my mentors and my teachers and adults that really cared about me weren't aware of the opportunities that did exist for myself as an Indigenous youth. So I was frequently the only Indigenous youth on sports teams, or in a room, or in a classroom, or engaging in these sorts of things. It was really awesome. I'm so proud of myself looking back on how far I got. with my own passion and, just found through sport and connection through that. And so, yeah, full circle now. As Jake already even highlighted the Aboriginal coaching modules. I love to do that kind of be in community, be on the ground, having these conversations about, how can we improve access for everyone, really, to be active, to find that help. We talked about that too. Especially the mental side, the emotional side, the social side, that spiritual and cultural side, where you're building that connection again, which all of us all want connection in our communities. And so I really think it's about what breaking down those barriers, having conversations, not being afraid to ask people for support, but kind of know what you're asking, right? Like, it's not just money, but maybe there's ways to collaborate in other ways that are unique. Even seeing that there's some buy-in already is awesome. So all I can say is that's amazing, and keep supporting that, because there's hundreds of youth like myself in Alberta still just for that door to open. And sometimes, it's just increasing our own awareness there for resources and just showing them the way. So I'll take a break. Back to Jake, if there's anything to add, but really quick, brief intro into myself. If there's any other questions that come up, you can really find a way to answer them in a way that's meaningful for you, because I know people. I'm happy to try my best to answer them always. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, it's true. Everything Beth said. I don't have too much more to say. Beth is like incredible superstar in my book. I met her up in Yellowknife, the Aboriginal Coaching module, facilitator training, and she's truly inspiring what she does. She goes into like the nooks and crannies of Northwest Territories in these little communities far out there, and provides so many youth and families with hope and opportunity and light. And I know she's super passionate about it, and it always weighs on her, like, oh, should I go back to the station? Out here? We're friends on Facebook, and I just admire her work and what she does, and I draw strength from that for my own self. So thank you, Beth.
Awesome. So as we think about sort of how this work can move forward, thinking about, Jake, you mentioned from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and thinking about how leaders can be involved in reconciliation with Indigenous people through sport, physical activity, and recreation. What advice or suggestions would you have about getting started in that important work? And we'll lead off with you, Jake.
Sure. Yeah. The biggest thing I would just say is to listen. I had a meeting recently, with a non-Indigenous organization that wanted us to be involved with them. And I was like, all right, great. So I had this meeting, and it was with one of the head people. A lot of the other ones, if it's just kind of general, my staff will meet, or they fill out the form and they meet. But if it's like a big picture, big person, I'm like, all right, let's do this. And so he shared what he's looking like, awesome. And then shared some ideas that we could do to partner and to create some historic things. Because we've done with ISA, if you go on our Facebook page, but also our website, you'll see we've done a lot of things that have never been done before. And I presented some of these big picture things to work towards. And I'm a mover and a shaker. I like, let's plan something, let's go do it. And he didn't really listen. He was just like, we can't do that. So and then got back to what he wanted. And then I was like, okay, well, and then I tried to educate him and share, well, Indigenous people are, this, that, and the other. And then he's like, yeah, well, this is, and then after the second time, I'm like, all right, you know what? Send me an email. My staff can get in touch with you, can do your small little thing that you want to do. But for me, it's like the number one thing is to listen and not assume that what's best, what's best. Because, non-Indigenous person that hasn't lived through that, and if you haven't been in the communities or haven't talked with the people, the elders, and seen the struggles and the barriers and the challenges, and you don't really know. So the best thing is just to listen. So if you want to, okay, what can I do? Have a meeting. Hey, all you got to do, and I've had many partners do this. They've been like, hey, we're this big company. We want to sponsor. We want to be a part, but we don't know what's best. So just coming from we're being sincere. we want to support you. So what do you think? You know, or like, we're a sport organization, or we're equipment organization and company. We want to support what we can. What would you say? And let the Indigenous group or people take the lead, and then just share that. And then you throw your ideas out there, but just listen, and don't, even if it doesn't work or it might not work, you know, kind of just talk and hear it out, and don't just shut it down right away. You know, these ideas and these incredible thoughts, because there's amazing, incredible people out there, Indigenous, that have amazing ideas and concepts that have never had the opportunity or resources to see them to fruition. And there's a lot of amazing non-Indigenous people, groups, organizations that have incredible ideas that could incorporate. And so the biggest thing is just to listen and then start off from there.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jake.
I agree.
And, yeah, go ahead, Beth. I was going to turn over to you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, yeah, I agree overall with all of that. It's so important. I'm so lucky and grateful now to have had so many opportunities to have conversation at so many different levels within not only sport, but recreation, physical activity, from international to grassroots levels. And, you know, I think that there's so many layers and so many, but we still exist within a system that is really exclusionary, in a system that needs a lot of overhaul, a lot of readjustment. There's so much that needs to take years and years and years for it to continue to exist and work within it. And so we've already kind of talked about the Aboriginal coaching module, workshops and stuff that exist too. I think that so many of the provincial and bodies, so ISCA is Alberta. I used to work for the Aboriginal, which is the territorial organization, kind of sister organization, territories, and it was wonderful. I find that it's really with a lot of those grassroots community or that are really trying to make things happen on the ground within community. Is really, really important to not always rely on national organizations or like national strategies to be the answer of our questions. I think there is certainly an onus on just as like programmers, as coaches, as teachers, as leaders, as managers, as administrators in our field, in any organization, to really invest in our own like knowledge or advocacy and what we're hoping to see. Because I think we get a lot of questions about like, what can we do? And but there's still this gap of where individuals still think it's a lot to take on, and the answer is a lot to take on. Graduate programs for university, for my own understanding as an Indigenous person, to be able to even be in these spaces and feel comfortable, you know, talking about the vast histories and that have spent 10 years now making sure that, you know, my facilitator learning and stuff, because I truly believe that it's important that we have people in community being the ones delivering these sorts of like workshops and learnings and opportunities too. So do, and even as Jake said already too, about how some of these kids just need to be told like a positive thing sometimes, like that we believe in you, or you can do this, because it's so true that in our spaces sometimes with youth and we can't even expect them to be comfortable when they've never had that safety before. And so then to suddenly say, well, we have this awesome program, why is no one showing up? There are elements to think about, you know, in terms of the relationship, comfortable, you know, have communities before in a safe and a good way, because there's a lot of spaces that we've tried to make safe happen, but then it's not safe, and it's really hard to get them anyone once they've had that feeling of just not being valued or unsafe area for them to be in. So I just find like really investing in those workshops that are great for the region you work in is really great. So the Aboriginal coaching modules, if you haven't taken that, for just going in and learning a little bit more. And then there's other workshops and other organizations too that, you know, really provide access to these sorts of opportunities, or even in which I love. I'm able to try and push the conversation a little bit farther, which is amazing. more of that access to role models and to the folks that are doing the work already is amazing. I mean, I know with Jake too, just like myself, you can ask us a question, we're going to want to follow up. You can put your idea and want to follow up. We'll be thinking about that idea later. We're doing our own thing, you know, in our own personal lives, and suddenly we'll look and our minds go right into that. It doesn't matter where or when or what's happening with, you know, our families or whatever, those ideas come through and it's inspiring even then. So yeah, to keep the conversations going, try to outreach when you can, and try to invest in your own knowledge too, because it's really, really hard to give everyone a nice little box of knowledge just in an hour-long conversation, 100-hour-long conversation. There's a lot to learn and do, but even if you're here and you're willing to chat and listen, it's an amazing. I always just like to remind people that I'm so grateful that you're even here to begin with. Awesome. And I hope that you feel comfortable enough to ask us the questions that you might be even afraid or nervous to. We really want to help. We really want to lessen. Make sure you know it's a safe space to ask us questions, because we are the safe leaders who want to make things better. And we really look at what happened already, right? Like, look at all the cool work. Even over the last few years, being able to now be in this powerful too. So if it wasn't for everyone else around and wanting to have conversations, we wouldn't be here. And so anyone else has more questions, keep adding them in if we can address them. I know we got a few more we can tackle.
Awesome. I heard really clearly from both of you, and I just want to sort of shout this out and reiterate it, is that it's that move from kind of doing for Indigenous peoples to doing with and co-creating and figuring out solutions where you're bringing your knowledge and the knowledge of Indigenous leaders together to build out programming opportunities. So I just want to check in that I stated that in a good way for and as reflective of what both of you were saying.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. So as leaders kind of look to get started in this space, what are a couple of things, and I feel like you've both said pieces of them along the way today, that you would really encourage them to, some first steps you would encourage them to take. So Jake, let's go back to you.
Yeah, I think just reach out. You know, when I was at the Alberta Indigenous Games, there was a guy volunteering at my daughter's school. He was another parent. I started speaking Cree to him. He was like taken back, like, holy smokes, is this white guy speaking Cree to me? And I learned up in northern Manitoba at a high school. And I don't speak it fluently, but I know quite a bit. A lot of people are surprised. And he invited me out to their board meeting. He was the founder of the Alberta Indigenous Games. So I just came, I just listened, and I was just there. And then I just showed up. Whenever there were meetings, I showed up, and then all of a sudden they needed a secretary. And then I volunteered. I can type, you know. I was journalism major at University at Temple in Philadelphia, where I played football. And so then I was there, and then I just showed up. And then he passed away after the games. And I listened, and I just listened, shared a little input I could here and there. But I remember the process of learning it and showing up and being there. And eventually I just started meeting a lot of people that knew me, knew I was sincere. And then he passed away, and we had no money for the Alberta Indigenous Games, and nobody wanted to work for free. And our president, Martha Campy from Drift Pile Cree Nation, I was a last ditch resort. It wasn't going to continue. And she's like, Jake, do you want to give it a shot? I'll mentor you, and you can go find the money. And I was like, all right. But the one, so, and then from there I worked, and then now I have my full-time job with ISCA. And, but just showing up and listening and doing what you can. And an example is with Kids Sport, their executive director, Greg, I don't know if he's on here, Ingalls, he's amazing. He reached out, he's like, Jake, we want to get more Indigenous kids playing sports. How do we do that? And I said, well, first of all, he's like, let's do a partnership, all that. I was like, before we do anything, spending time, you have to get rid of the part on your form that says, you know, provide your income statement tax return. And I'm like, a lot of Indigenous families, low income, you know, single moms, grandmothers, grandparents don't have that ready available. And that can just be a barrier. And so I was like, you got to get rid of that. He's like, well, we've never done that before. In the history of Kids Sport, we have our form and it's set and it's the same and it can't be changed. That's not my call. And I'm like, okay, well, And I was very blunt. I said, do you want to be part of reconciliation or not? And I just waited. And he said it was a little intimidating, but he's like, all right. And then he's like, okay, well, let me go back and talk, because I didn't want to waste any time. I had kind of, with the organization years before that had wasted a lot of time. And there was like, oh yeah, we can help so many kids out, but you have so many barriers. And so then he came back, he met with the board, and they're like, okay, let's do it. Let's take the lead. Let's take his input. And so we vetted. So they had to get a letter of endorsement from chief and council or a social services worker or their president for their Métis settlement. And so we add that. So the first time ever, it's included now. And they ended up paying 10 grand to redo a whole registration form. It's going to break down so many, but we're going to get so many Indigenous kids now are going to sign up to pay for the registration fees, and they're going to use that as a pilot and then maybe do that in other places. But yeah, biggest thing is show up and be willing to listen, and to, if you have been used to doing something, or your organization, your company have been used to doing something a set way for how many years, and someone says something that's not that way, and it's like, well, we can't do that. We've never done that. Don't set your mind that that's what it is. Be like, okay, wait, let me step back. Let me look, consider it, think about it, maybe wait 24 hours, think about it some more, but, and then go back and really discuss, because there's a lot of things that can be adjusted and have these barriers broken down. And it will be even more amazing for your organization and kids sport now, because we've had this amazing partnership. They partnered with Edmonton Oilers Foundation. They did a 50-50, and they got money to pay for kids in oil country to play hockey, up to $1,500. And now, and our partnership, I think, helped with that. And now we're going to get many, many Indigenous kids doing that. We'd love to do the same thing with the Flames. If the Flames do that in Flames country, throwing it out there if there's any Flames people. But yeah, just biggest things, just again, listen, don't close your mind off to the way things have been done before. Consider what can be done better, and then how it can enhance. Because with ISCA, I like to say, whenever we do these partnerships, hey, we will enhance what you guys are doing by being associated with us, partner with us. We're connected to all these amazing people at all these communities. There's so many champions everywhere. We'll help enhance you, and you guys can help enhance us by saying we're partnerships with you, kind of like with kids sport. And it's been really good. So
I love that example so much. Thank you for bringing that forward and sharing that. And yeah, just that like open-mindedness. It's always been done this way. Okay, it's time to do something different if we actually want to make change. So that's a great story. Beth, do you want to add on to that?
I think, yeah, really, if you want to make change, you really need to ground yourself in the resources and tools that kind of already exist to help you with that, and to not try and rewrite the wheel either, to really go with the guiding documents and frameworks that exist, even though nothing's perfect. I don't think anything's ever perfect, but I think that so often there's levels of frustration, or no one really wants to change things so much, it's organizational or policy based, or these things, and it's so understandable. It's a barrier for other organizations that might have to pay a huge sum of money to like alter things within the organization. Taking a step back and reflecting on that is, why are those people not allowed in your space to begin with? And that's what we go back to the history of colonization, what really happened in Canada, and why Indigenous people are not in those spaces. We can't just pretend that now we have a safe place and everyone's welcome. That's not how reconciliation works. We always talk about truth coming before reconciliation. So you really do need to think about, why are your organization's policies exclusive? Like, what grounded that? And was the intent of that to be exclusionary to begin with? And I think sometimes we don't ask ourselves those hard questions when we need. And sometimes we do. We do, especially in the sport world. We know that so many policies are and we're not changing them nowadays for some reason, because it's too much work, it's too much money, it's too it's all of our organizations are so under capacity, which is across the board, but it's still important. So all I can really do is reiterate how important it is to like change the systemic barriers within your organizational policies, because they will do it, and you do the work to do that. It's really challenging. I'm gonna thank you.
Thanks, Beth. 100%. I just want to share I just want to share one little example because I'm representing, there's the ISA presentation, but I'm also representing Alberta Indigenous Games on here too. They're two different organizations, so make sure that that's important. But one example of what Beth was just talking about of having this systemic policies, everything's the same. I'm just going to say something about the government, of Alberta right now. There's the Alberta Summer Games that happens. And they announced, it's in Okotoks 2023. They have 2,700 athletes, youth, and technical officials. Give a 4-day event from the government of Alberta. The Alberta Indigenous Games, this year we'll have over 4,000 athletes, youth, technical officials. And it's an 8-day event, and we have to big and hope that we get 75,000. There's just one big discrepancy. But when you go on their website, the third frequent question, you click on it, it says, how do I know what zone I'm in? How do I know what zone I am to participate? How do I do this? And there's 8 different zones throughout Alberta. And each zone has about 150, 200 little towns, little hamlets, little like farmers' fields, like hardly anyone that lives in really tiny ones. And they have it through all of Alberta. Guess what's missing? There's 6, literally out of all of Alberta, there's 6 Indigenous communities, but it's not even the full community. It says Fishing Lake. It doesn't say Fishing Lake Métis settlement. It doesn't even say, anyways, there's 6 of them. So there's 46 First Nations, and within the nations, there's different communities. Like, for example, Little Red River Cree up north, they have John Doe Prairie, Garden River. And then I'm missing the other one just right now off the top of my head. Anyways, there's different communities that should be recognized. And so it's completely missing the boat, and it says updated 2015. And I met with the Minister of Culture last week. He's just like, oh, it's just updated. My heart was hoping he'd be like, that's so messed up. I can't believe that happened. We need to fix this. He's like, oh, it's just outdated. I don't know if it's going to be updated, but that's just an example that's still out there. We are in 2022. And that's on there. And the Arctic Winter Games, same thing. We're working to promote the Arctic Winter Games. There were only 30 Indigenous kids that tried out in the last Arctic Winter Games, which is above the 55th parallel in Alberta for Team Alberta North. And I was finding out. I'm like, all right, what about this? I didn't know anything about it. So I looked, and it's like, what zones can I be part of? It has all the communities. And then off to the side, it says First Nation reserves. We don't use the word reserve. We use communities. And then underneath it says IR 150, IR 151, IR 152, stands for Indian Reserve. It's on there today, right now. If you Google Arctic Winter Games Team Alberta and you look down what communities, they should have their proud Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation, Fort Mackay Nation, they should have First Nation. They should have to be proud to see. But right now, if you want to be the Arctic Winter Games, Alberta Summer Games, and you're Indigenous family, parent, grandparent, and you want to get your kid, you don't see yourself there. And you don't know what IR is. Not everybody knows that or feels included to go be part of something that has, not your proud name. So we're working to get that changed for the Arctic Winter Games, and we're doing a whole list ourselves. And I don't think it was malicious. I don't think people were purposely doing that. I think it's just the way that the systems have been and that have been there. And so there's things that we're doing to change them. So if you ever see anything within your organization that's like, hey, that's kind of messed up, think of it from an Indigenous perspective. Anything I do, I always like to think of like the most absolute vulnerable person and how would they portray this whenever we put out any content. Will they feel included? Will they feel, and so, I just invite you to, if you see anything, call it out. Hey, that's, and you can come reach out to us or other Indigenous organizations or other Indigenous leaders, elders, whoever, and ask for support on how to address that.
Yeah, what a brilliant invitation to start to rethink some of these. I want to stay on that thread, thinking about how club leaders or PSO leaders, organizations who are wanting to do this work, what do they need to do to really create those welcoming spaces, teams, or experiences for Indigenous athletes? And you've just given some really great event examples. I wonder, as well as sort of some things for them to noodle on in terms of how they're representing or not representing Indigenous participants. What other examples can you share? And maybe we'll lead off with Beth, because I know you've played in this space extensively, Beth.
The top of my head on this one. I'm so grateful be involved in one of the soccer club's inclusion and diversity workshops from a while ago, because so much came from that. Kind of back on the soccer world. So I grew up playing competitive soccer in Alberta. That was the sport competitive in. I was a multi-sport athlete. Be involved in sport most of my enough to get to, I guess, the varsity level, enough to be at tryouts, that sort of. But at that point, then veered into deciding to go into more sport medicine. At that point, I was coaching already. I was playing a few other roles as well, and I kind of took the opportunity to look at the sport medicine side of things, to get more to the therapy side of things. That's why I started with the faculty of kinesiology, or the kinesiology, but in the faculty of phys ed then, but now kinesiology, sport and recreation. What's really interesting, just kind of about sport leaders and trying to develop that inclusion, is sometimes we don't stop and think about, communities outside of our own, or stuck on Edmonton serving Edmonton or Calgary serving Calgary, and in these inclusion pieces, I guess you could say, or why aren't we including, or why aren't we so eager to be here? Why aren't they coming in our space? We're inviting them, but really ultimately part of that is especially where I live right now, we actually don't have a ton of reserves, urban or remote, but down in Edmonton, that's where I grew up, that's where I'm familiar, you have quite a few. If you can't name 3 of like the urban reserves in and around Edmonton, you should by now. And if not, go home and think about some of those urban reserves, 3 of them, why communities might not be in your spaces. And when we were doing an inclusion workshop with some of those members from the soccer organization, part of what they immediately were thinking about was, oh, well, why don't we run our training camps, or why don't we run some of our summer camps, actually out in urban reserve, or why are we not? And right away, feedback about, well, their fields are so bad, or they're so far away, or like there's no way the city would want to go out there. It's a good time to and say, like, but why is it that people feel that way, and is there no way to, as soccer programmer, as a soccer coach who has coached in all conditions in Alberta, including playing in provincial final in Fort McMurray on gravel, right? Like, I know mainstream, we don't value our fields as much as we would like to. Sure, we love having the pristine facilities and stuff, but that doesn't mean that kids on gravel playing fields to play once in a while. So why are we so hesitant? Opportunity, weekend opportunity to go and actually host a trial or a camp or something, in a community that is, especially when that could still be a draw for more individuals from your urban city or urban location, where, again, if I'm looking at Edmonton, thinking about Enoch for look at hosting some sort of trial or workshop, in those west areas where it even might be a little bit more comfortable for or elders or knowledge holders or coaches to be there, where you can go out to a field in the middle of nowhere truly and bring some stuff with you and still make it an inviting space. You don't need much. We know that. We can bring out a new net to hook up to the ones that are ripped up. That's completely fine. Sometimes that's an additional cost, but also just having some staff there that have, happy to be there and excited to be there is one step too. And there are, staff on the ground in our places that are aware of, and are aware of how they want to continue to support being done on the ground. So I would just say, continuing to kind of invest in that profession, continuing to invest in some of those relationships and just trying things. We're also stuck on failure still a lot, but there's really no way to try things in spaces that are continuous, there for us to use and try and continue and partnerships again. So just ways to think about where, and why, not just holding them in the community center all the time, facilities, thinking about ways to branch out. That's just one example that seemed actually to go a long way with that club we were working with, because right away they stayed on the call afterwards, hour just shooting ideas and things. I wasn't even really a part of the conversation. I was just like, this is awesome to hear you guys think about this and being passionate about. I was not expecting that, and I was grateful for that sort of feedback, because as long as that are giving them something to work with, we know we don't always have a plan from A to Z, because we've never seen it either. We've never seen, our communities happy stream society before. We don't know how to get there either, but we're trying our best. And again, there's so many people on the ground now, and in all levels of government, all levels of the system. Doesn't matter if you're, a formal coach or not, or where you are. Advocacy and that knowledge is enough to at least spur those conversations and hopefully get you thinking a little bit more about those spaces and how important spaces are. Indigenous, safe. You can't always guarantee safety, but you can at least invite people in a good way. And that's really, really important to do. Value. No one is going to want to work with you, and they're not going to necessarily trust you, or that you have those intentions that you want to make. And of course, we kind of talked already too about that sort of like paternalistic or doing for. It's okay to want to make things better for Indigenous communities. It's okay to want to be someone that says, I want to be a good ally. I want to make change. I want to make things better. That's awesome. Like, don't shy away from that feeling. People that have those feelings, and then it's just thinking, okay, right, I just need to first and foremost, person to person, talk to them, get to know them a little bit. Just try and build that relationship, because it's just so much easier to then have these conversations about, well, let's try this at least. And that's awesome. There's so many good things come from just trying, because that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years. Things work out a lot of the time, and all of a sudden a new opportunity comes up to do something else that's really cool, and now I'm here. So keep doing it and keep trying, and just keep doing your best. That's all I can.
Awesome. Thanks, Beth. Over to you, Jake.
Yeah, I agree. Can you restate the question again real quick?
Yes, I can. It was around how we create safe, welcoming, and inclusive environments for Indigenous participants in our clubs or our PSOs, kind of building on the pieces you've already put forward today.
Yeah, one big thing is when you're meeting with someone. I was at a event, press release of I don't care, of the Oilers collaboration thing with the foundation, and I was talking to a guy, and someone introduced me to him and potential person to network with, and he just was like, he looked behind me, and he yeah, and he kind of looked down at his watch, and as I was talking, wasn't making eye contact. I've been in sales for 12 years. 89% of communication is non-verbal. 58% is your body language. 31% is your tone of voice. You could say this like, Beth, I love that sweater. I love that sweater, Beth. That's awesome. But I could say the same exact words. Beth, I love that sweater. Like, what does that portray? It's the same words, but it's how I speak. Or if I'm like, Beth, I love that sweater. Like, it conveys a completely different message. And what I felt was completely like, I don't care about you or your organization or your people. Like, I'm too busy of a guy. Like, I don't care, and that kind of hurt. And I was on a list of 5 people to speak with the partnership to be interviewed by the media. And the media interviewed all the others and didn't want to come talk about the historic part that ISCA has to play with kids sport. And finally, I had to jump in. I talked to Greg. I was like, Greg, man, we got to really get this going, because media is not going to get it out there. And so then he talked to Oilers TV, and then they interviewed me, and they're like, wow, that's such an amazing story. Well, it's like, yes, it is an amazing story. Reach out, talk to people. But the biggest thing, I think, to make Indigenous leaders, coaches, youth, family feel welcome is to give your full attention. Don't be looking away. Don't be looking at your phone, your watch, and if it goes over, it's okay. Say sorry to whoever, or just give them a heads up, because Indigenous people love to talk. We have a lot to share, and don't always have the voice to talk. And so they get a chance, they love talking. And so just listen sincerely with your ears, but your whole body, everything, and be sincere about it, is what I would say. And then people will feel safe And then they'll feel open to share their true, genuine thoughts, their true ideas, their true barriers. Because if you really want to do this and you're sincere about wanting to make a difference and change, you have to listen sincerely.
Beautiful. And what a great way to kind of wrap us up today and take us into our table discussions so that people can have some of those sincere discussions together in a smaller group and dive into a few different topic areas. So I just want to thank both of you so much for being here and for the opportunity for me to learn from you and to share with our audience some of the great lessons that you were able to bring forward today. And that opportunity to see each other, listen to each other, and learn from each other is really so much of what this work is based on. And it takes time. And it's not necessarily the timeline that I'm going to say some of our colonized structures would expect it to be. It needs to be a two-way street and kind of built together in terms of what that timeline and relationship looks like. So that was one of my learnings along the journey. Go ahead, Jake.
And I just wanted to give a big shout out. I saw Natalie on here to Sport Canada for the sport and social development funding we got. We would not be able to do 90% of what we do without that funding. It's like, we're grateful. We're with that funding, we actually are able to have staff. It would only just be myself without them. Whereas you have BC body, they got 19 staff. Saskatchewan's got 15 throughout, Ontario 30. We're the third highest Indigenous province. We only have funding for, like, it's terrible. So, but we got funding now from Sport Canada, which is incredible. So we're building this brand, and just can't say enough the shout out and just the gratitude we are for Sport Canada for supporting us. But now it's good because we've been able to build this thing, and now sponsors are reaching out, and eventually try to get independent of government and have our own thing. Be great. But man, for a long time, we're going to still need that support. So grateful.
Awesome. Well, I'm grateful for both of you. And again, just a huge thanks. And we'll encourage our participants to stay on and to join the different table discussions. We have one around practical ways to create more Indigenous inclusive sport opportunities, one around the truth and reconciliation calls to action, one around cultural safety education and where to start, one that's specifically dedicated to the Indigenous Sport Council of Alberta, and then one around engaging Indigenous communities. So just some opportunities to connect on this topic a little bit more. And I'm just going to share back the next session we have coming up in the speaker series before we take us out of the room. And that next session is on September 14th. So we're taking the summer off, and we'll be back with a session on anti-racism in sport. And you will be able to find the registration information on our discussion series webpage where you registered for today. So without further ado, just want to say thank you again to our two panelists and to our audience, and look forward to the table discussions. Take care, everyone. Have a great summer.